Hi, welcome to the Woodshop Nerdery. The Woodshop Nerdery is a hobby level channel all about woodworking and the hobby woodworking shop. I've been making videos on this channel for a little over a year, and it now has almost 1,100 subscribers and almost 100,000 views. And I've uploaded about 70 videos. But with all those views, subscribers, and videos, there's one topic I haven't covered so far, and that's designing woodworking projects. So in this video, I'm going to share with you the tips I use in the software program called Inkscape to create my project plans. This video will be mostly a computer tutorial. If you don't like this sort of talking video, please check out one of my others. I have plenty of woodworking videos showing project builds and plenty of woodworking action. But if you stick around, you might learn something, or you might be able to contribute something in the comments that would help me and everybody else. Before I get into describing how I use Inkscape to create my woodworking plans, let me give you a couple reasons why I use Inkscape rather than some of the more popular software like Fusion 360 or SketchUp. Well, one of the first reasons is that this product is free. If I compare that to Autodesk's Fusion 360, it is a paid software. I'm either going to pay $70 a month or $545 annually, or I could buy a 3-year plan. In regard to SketchUp, it's also a paid software. It looks like the lowest tier, which works on web browsers or Chromebook, would be $119. But if I wanted to get something to install on my computer, I'm looking at $300 a year. Or I can go to the studio level, which is $700 a year. Let me show you some of the drawings I've made in the past, which I feel have really helped me be successful in the project. Here's the front view of a cabinet system I built for my basement a few years ago. And here's a different view, a top view, side view of the cabinets to keep track of the dimensions. I can print these out and take them out to the garage with me. It's also very handy when you find a picture you like on the internet to go ahead and copy it, and then you can draw right on top of it. I believe this picture is from the Craig user community website. So a fellow woodworker built this nightstand and posted it. I really like the proportions, and I wanted to duplicate that. As you may have seen on my YouTube channel, I made some windows for my shed, and here's a side view of the shed dimensions, and my wife and I played around with different window sizes. So it was very helpful from a scaling standpoint to figure out what dimensions we wanted for those windows. And then actually building each window, I laid out the parts here and recorded the dimensions. And again, I can print this out and take it to the garage with me. And I wanted to construct the window using a combination of dowels, half-lap joints, and rabbets. So I needed to lay that out to keep it straight in my head when I went out into the garage, exactly what I was building. When the pandemic started in early 2020, I needed a desk at home, and I decided to build one myself. I modeled this design off of many of the Frank Lloyd Wright architectural elements. He used a stylized version of the sumac plant and various stained glass windows or friezes or other elements in his buildings. I've never seen it used in furniture. I thought it would be kind of cool to try it here, and I actually built this desk from the design. And here are all the little pieces and the correct angles that needed to be cut to make the seed pod for the sumac plant and the leaves. My most recent project was an underbench cabinet storage, which also stabilized my adjustable height Husky workbench. This is obviously on its side, so it fits on the sheet of paper. The green rectangles are the baskets, and then these other pieces of wood are color-coded to be the various parts of the build. And the black rectangles here are the legs to the workbench. And here's a top view of the same drawing. And it's always very helpful to translate those into cut sheets so I know how much material I need to buy. And now for my latest project, I'm building a bookshelf for my daughter. So I'll use this project to walk you through some of those key operations in Inkscape that I find really helpful. This piece is from Stickley's Highlands collection, and they call it an etagere. I call it a bookshelf. And I showed this picture to my daughter, and she really liked it and gave me the thumbs up. And though it has some elements of that American mission style, Stickley here is calling it Scottish arts and crafts. And I believe what they're referring to is the design is inspired by Macintosh. And you can see here on the Ingram chair on the right, the triple square cutouts and the wide vertical slats here, sort of mimicked over here in the bookcase. So as you can see, I'm pretty far along with designing this project. So I've got side view, front view, top view, detailed views, and also the shelves already done. So this is pretty much complete, and I've already used these plans to go ahead and start purchasing lumber. But I'm going to start with a brand new document and walk you through the process from scratch so I can show you how I did it. I'll start by creating a new project. To capture the design elements, I'm going to draw right on top of the images I downloaded from the internet. So I'm going to import those now by selecting File, Import. Okay, so here are the 3 images I was able to find on the internet. I do have a little bit of a problem here. I've got a lot of white space on the 2 on the left. So to get rid of that, what I do is go to Extensions, Raster, Crop. And on the crop window, I select Live Preview. I don't want to crop the bottom, so I'll type a 0 there. But I do want to crop from the right and the left, and I'm going to make a starting guess around 200 pixels. Looks like I could go 4 maybe. Might be a little too much. Okay, I can live with that. Next, I'm going to reference this text from the Stickley website describing the dimensions of the furniture. And for convenience, I'll paste that directly in here. Probably the most frequently used tool in drawing this furniture is rectangles. And in version 1.2, that tool is near the upper left corner of the screen. I'm going to activate that tool by clicking on it, and then I'm going to click and drag to draw a rectangle. I want to change the color to something a little more subdued, so I'm going to choose one of these pre-built fill colors below, but I also want to adjust what they call the stroke, and that's the line work that outlines this box. I actually want to get rid of the stroke because I have found that the stroke gets counted in the dimensions. And so what happens is as you scale something, the line width also scales, and that can mess with your dimensions if you try to reset that line back to something more reasonable. I find it much easier to deal with these boxes without the stroke installed. I get a much more accurate dimensioning. So to do that, down here in the right hand corner, I'm just going to double click on stroke. That'll bring up the fill and stroke dialog on the right. With the stroke tab selected, I'm going to click the X to get rid of the stroke. So because my dimensions from the Stickley website are listed in inches, I'm going to change my units here at the top to inches. And then I'm going to manually type in the dimensions. So the width is 30 inches. And the height is 76 inches. So in a one-to-one scaling, this represents the actual size of the bookshelf when looking at the front. I also need to account for the side view, and that's going to be 15 inches by 76 inches. So I'll select my rectangle tool again, click and drag, switch back to my select and transform tool, and I'll set the width to 15 and the height again to 76. So to keep things organized, what I like to do is work with layers. There's a layer button down here at the bottom. If I click on that, I'll get a layer and objects dialog on the right. And you can see it's already populated with some of the layers. I want to create a new layer, and I'm going to call it Dimension. And I'm going to move some of my items to that layer so I can keep them organized. And I'm going to rename layer 1 Images. And the advantage here is I can lock these down. So now you can see I can't select or edit those. That gives me some protection from making mistakes. And I can also turn that layer off so that all of those elements are hidden if I feel like they're in my way. So now I want to use my dimension rectangles to scale the images to the correct size. So I'm going to drag this rectangle over that image, but I have a problem here. I can't see the image. So I want to go back to my fill and stroke dialog box. I want to make sure I'm on the fill tab. Then I want to look at these color settings down here to adjust the transparency of the rectangle. I have 2 ways I can do that. I can adjust the alpha of the color, or I can use the opacity slider. They do about the same thing. For now, I'll move the rectangle out of the way and select the image. And I want to come up here to the top of the screen and click this lock button. Make sure that's a padlock. What that does is it makes sure that no matter how I drag the image's width stays in one-to-one relationship to its height. That way I don't skew it out of proportion. I'm going to come up here to the right-hand side of the screen and turn off snapping so I can fine-tune things here. I'm going to just continue to scale until I get sort of a best fit. A powerful tool here is zooming in and out. I find the best way to do that is hold the control key down on my keyboard and then use my center mouse wheel to zoom in. So that there I can see I'm not quite aligned, but I'm getting close. Coming up to the top, it looks like I'm not as tall as I need to be. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that when you take a photograph, it can distort the size of objects because you may not be taking that image directly dead on to the element. And I can tell that this image was taken almost dead on right here because here I can see the top of that shelf and here I can see the bottom of that shelf. So I know that probably the camera lens was level with this shelf since I could only see the side. So there's going to be some distortion in the vertical because of that. So if I click the center arrow, I can scale this slightly up to the 76-inch dimension. So next I'll just do the same thing with this image. So I have the two images on the left correctly dimensioned. I'm not going to bother correctly dimensioning this image on the right. In my experience, images taken at a skewed angle like this aren't very helpful for figuring out dimensions because the sizes get distorted. But they are very helpful for figuring out various elements of construction, so I do want it in here. Now I can lock down my image so I don't accidentally scale it. I can also lock down and hide my dimensioning rectangles because I don't need them right now. So next, I'm going to begin drawing the side view elements. So I'll create a new layer called side view. And I'll just come in and start drawing rectangles. Now I've just realized I've drawn two rectangles here, but I actually only want to draw one rectangle. Because what I want to do is I want to get the dimension of this piece correct, and then I'll copy and paste it and put it over this piece at the front. I'm going to make the assumption that the two pieces are identical. First, I'll work on the width. I got to pay attention to the fact that I have another piece here in the background. So it's easiest to look at this section of the image to line up the side of my rectangle and then drag this over. Then I'll scroll down and I'll get the bottom correct. This next tip might be a little controversial. I prefer to work in millimeters, so I'm going to change it to millimeters. And I'm going to look at the width here and I'm going to say that it's most likely 42 millimeters. And I also know from the dimensions from the website, it's supposed to be 76 inches tall. So just as a double check, I'm going to multiply 76 inches times 25.4 millimeters per inch, and that'll give me 1,930 millimeters. I'll leave off the 0.4. Now let's check to see how that lines up with the piece. I think it's looking pretty good. It is a little bigger, but again, like I said, there can be some distortions in the image. So sometimes it's better to just normalize everything with the measurements up here at the top. Next, I need to duplicate this rectangle, so I'll select it, select Control C, and then I'll select Control V. And I want to make sure that this rectangle is vertically aligned with this rectangle here on the left. So I'll select it first, the target rectangle next. Then I'll go up to the object menu, select Align and Distribute. And I want to click the button that says Align Top Edges. So now we know the top edges are aligned. But I need to move it to the left so that it resides on top of that other workpiece. So I'll use the left arrow key on my keyboard to move it over. Then again, I'll zoom in to make sure I'm happy with it. There we go. And then I'll just keep drawing rectangles until I'm happy. Here's one more tip that we got to contend with. I'll turn snapping back on. And I'm going to use a rectangle here at the top to define my offset. So when I use offset and spacers, I like to make it a crazy color. And I'm going to make that 8 millimeters high. Just taking a guess here. So now I want to snap this rectangle into this corner. So if I put my cursor here near that corner, I know that the snapping logic is going to try to snap that corner to anything I drag it close to. There we go. Got a good snap there. So now all I have to do is drag this wide enough until it snaps to the line of this rectangle. But the problem is, because I got rid of the outlines for these rectangles, you can't really distinguish between these two pieces. So this is where I like to come in and make one of them a slightly different color. And if I want to check how that looks, sometimes it's helpful to turn off the image. So we would have this rectangle. It would be similar to this one, although I doubt it'll be identical, though it'll probably be slightly different dimension, but we'll compare that to the picture. And then I have to work with this rectangle down here at the bottom, and this is an opportunity to talk about some more tips. So I'll turn on the image. I'll line up my rectangle with the image as best I can. I'll drag it to size. And now I have to contend with making an arc here. But before I do that, I want to make sure I understand the dimensions of this arc. So I'm going to draw another rectangle. That kind of goes from the midpoint down to the baseline and all the way over to the right. And I want to keep that over here for future use. In order to make this line here at the bottom match the curve in the image, I need to convert this object into not a rectangle, but something where I can edit the nodes. To do that, I select it, then go to the Path menu and select Object to Path. It's the first choice right at the top. Now that I've selected Object to Path, I'm going to select on the left-hand side here the Edit Path Nodes button. Then I'm going to double click that line at the bottom, and then at the top I will use the button to make that a curved segment. So now I can use these handles to model this curve. It's good to keep the handles about the same length because the length of the handle sort of determines the intensity of the curve. And if I want to get a smooth match, I try to keep the length about the same. So what I mean by that is I don't want one like this and one like this and try to match the curve. It just will never match. I've got them about the same angle here. I've got them about the same length. So that should make for a pretty smooth curve. If I turn off the image, we can verify that. And I've also preserved the dimension of that curve here as this rectangle, which I'll use for measurements. So that leads me to my next tip. I'm going to start annotating some of these measurements. Okay, so now I can use this box to record some dimensions. I know that the distance between the bottom of the curve and the peak of the curve is going to be the height of this box, which we'll call 52 millimeters. So I'll select my text box over here on the left, click on the screen, and just type on my keyboard 52 mm. And because this is a dimension, not a workpiece, I like to make it some crazy color. And now I can draw this box, which represents the distance from the bottom of the foot to the start of this workpiece. And it is 51 millimeters. So I can copy, paste, type in 51. So really, everything else here is a repeated step using dimensioning boxes, snapping, changing the color of boxes, and eventually through repeating those steps I'll end up with details like this. You noticed I've even captured the pins that go through the tenons. I've also captured the groove that runs in this top piece to accept the top shelf. Same here to accept the middle shelf, and on the bottom shelf. I captured the curve here on this workpiece the same way, and I'm recording the thickness of the board plus the dimensions between each shelf.
including details like the pin location for the adjustable shelf. You can see what that looks like here. Then from a top view perspective, I'm capturing the rails representing the bottom apron on all four sides, plus the tenons, in addition to the inset from the inside where this board should be located. So as I print this out and take it to the garage, I should be able to reproduce those dimensions as mortise and tenons. I'm using dimension blocks here to describe the location of the three square details, showing how big the square is and how far it is from each side. The other aspect of that dimension is captured here, showing how far down from the top of this piece the square starts, how tall it is, and how much space there is between.
Well, that does it for this woodshop nerdery video. I thank you for sticking to the end with me, and I'll see you in the next one.